Imagine for a second that you are running the single biggest corporation on Earth. You have the most money. You have the most employees. Your brand is absolute. For over 2,000 years, you have been the center of the world. Literally. You call yourself the Middle Kingdom because you believe you are the physical center of civilization. But then, the world shifts beneath your feet. A notification pops up. A chance to upgrade. A chance to adapt. But you don't just ignore it. You look at that notification with total disdain, and you click remind me later. Most empires fall because they are conquered, because they are weak, because they run out of soldiers. But the Qing Dynasty? They did not lose because they were weak. They lost because they were too proud to change. They were the empire that ignored the update notification. And by the time they tried to reboot the system, it was already corrupted. I am James, and on this episode of James Explains, we are watching the crash. Let us set the scene properly, because it is easy to look back at history and laugh at the losers. It is easy to say, well, they were just backward. But that is not true. In the year 1800, the Qing Dynasty was not just a country. It was the economy. If you looked at the global GDP back then, China was not just a slice of the pie. It was half the bakery. They controlled nearly 1/3 of the entire world population. Think about the scale of that. 1 out of every 3 people on the planet bowed to the Qing Emperor. Their economy was larger than all of Europe combined. While Europe was fighting in the mud, tearing itself apart with revolutions and petty wars, the Qing were sipping tea in silk robes, managing a complex bureaucracy that had worked perfectly for centuries. The British, the French, the Americans? To the Qing Emperor, these were not rivals. They were not even peers. They were customers. Annoying customers, but customers. You see, the West wanted everything China had. They wanted the porcelain. They wanted the silk. And more than anything else, they wanted the tea. Britain was addicted to tea. It was the fuel of their empire. But China? They did not want a single thing the West had to offer. Wool? No thanks. We have silk. Clocks. We have the sun. Science. We have Confucius. They looked at the developing industrial world, at the smokestacks rising in London, and they shrugged. Their mindset was simple. We are the standard. Why would the master adopt the tools of the barbarian? They believed they were the update, the final version of civilization. But there is a dangerous problem with being the best for too long. You get comfortable. You stop checking your blind spots. So if they were so rich, so powerful, and so stable, what actually went wrong? The first notification arrived in 1793. It did not come as an invasion fleet. It came as a diplomat. Lord Macartney of Great Britain arrives in Beijing. And he does not come empty-handed. He brings gifts. But these are not fruit baskets or gold. He brings the latest tech. He brings telescopes, barometers, model warships, air guns. This was the iPhone 15 of the 18th century. Macartney is basically saying, look at this. We are figuring out physics. We are mastering steam. Partner with us. And the Emperor's reaction? It is legendary. He does not care about the tech. He does not even look at the steam engine models. He cares about the bow. He wants Macartney to kowtow, to touch his head to the floor 9 times. To admit that he is lesser. Macartney refuses. He bends a knee, like he would for his own king, but he will not grovel. To the Qing, this was an insult. So, the Emperor sends a letter to King George III. In this letter, it is the ultimate unsubscribe. He writes, we possess all things. I set no value on objects strange or ingenious, and have no use for your country manufactures. Let that sink in for a moment. I have no use for your manufactures. While China turned back to tradition, Britain turned to coal. Britain was installing the Industrialization 2.0 update. They were unlocking mass production. They were unlocking steel. They were unlocking modern ballistics. The gap was widening. Every single day. But inside the Forbidden City, the silence was comforting. They thought the walls would keep the future out. But you cannot pause history. And soon, Britain knocked on the door again. And this time, they were not polite. By the 1830s, the dynamic had shifted. Britain was broke. They were buying so much tea from China. Their silver reserves were draining away. China still would not buy British goods. The trade balance was a disaster. So the British merchants did something dirty. Something illegal. They found a backdoor into the Chinese market. Opium. They flooded China with drugs grown in India. It was a massive cartel operation disguised as trade. Suddenly, the silver started flowing out of China. Millions of Chinese citizens became addicted. The economy started to wobble. The workforce was paralyzed. Soldiers were too high to hold their spears. Bureaucrats were too high to count the taxes. The Qing emperor finally realized, we have a virus in the system. He sends his best man, Lin Zexu, to Canton. Lin is incorruptible. He is the hardliner. He arrests the dealers. He seizes the opium. And in a move that shocked the world, he destroys it. 20,000 chests of British opium. He mixes it with lime and salt water and washes it out to sea. In modern money, that is hundreds of millions of dollars of product, gone. The Qing thought they had fixed the glitch. They banned the app. They deleted the files. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Because to the British Empire, that was not just lost product. That was an act of war. The British Parliament voted. By a terrifyingly narrow margin, they decided to send the fleet. This is where the Qing Empire still had a chance. They had the home field advantage. They had millions of soldiers. They had thousands of ships. But they made one fatal mistake. They assumed the war would be fought like the old wars. Swords, spears, courage. They did not know what was coming over the horizon. The First Opium War was not a war. It was a slaughter. The Chinese Navy sailed out in wooden junks. These ships were beautiful. They were designed for coastal patrol, powered by wind and sweat. And then, they met the Nemesis. That was the literal name of the British ship. The Nemesis. It was made of iron. It did not need wind because it had a steam engine. It could sail against the current. To the Chinese sailors, this looked like black magic. A monster breathing fire and smoke, moving against the wind. The Qing cannons? They were fixed in place. They could not aim well. The gunpowder was old. The British cannons? Swivel mounts. Rapid fire. Explosive shells. 55. It was like bringing a musket to a drone fight. The British did not just sink the Navy. They sailed right up the Yangtze River. They choked the Grand Canal. They cut off the food supply to Beijing. In 1842, the Qing had to surrender. They signed the Treaty of Nanking, the first unequal treaty. They had to pay for the war. They had to pay for the opium they destroyed. And they had to give up an island, a barren rock called Hong Kong. Now stop. Losing a war happens. Rome lost battles. The British lost battles. Losing does not kill an empire. What kills an empire is what happens next. This was the wake-up call. The alarm was ringing. The house was on fire. You would think the Qing would say, okay, we need to modernize. Now. Immediately. But they did not. Why? Because of the mindset. The ruling elite, the scholars, they rationalized the defeat. They said, we did not lose because their technology was better. We lost because we had traitors. Or they said, it was bad luck. Or the classic excuse. They are barbarians, they fight without honor. They went into denial. For almost 20 years after the war, they did almost nothing to change the military. Nothing. So history repeated itself. The Second Opium War, 1860. This time, the foreigners did not just stay on the coast. They marched all the way to Beijing. They burned down the Summer Palace, the most beautiful garden on earth. A place of art and culture turned to ash. Only then did the panic set in. Only then did a faction of the government say, we need to update. This was called the self-strengthening movement. And this brings us to the most painful part of the story. They tried to download 2% of the update. They said, let us buy their guns, but keep our system. Western hardware, Chinese software. It sounds like a good compromise, right? But it was a disaster. They built shipyards, but filled them with corrupt officials who stole the budget. They bought battleships, but did not buy enough ammunition. They built academies, but still promoted people based on poetry exams, not engineering skills. It was a patch job, and patches do not fix a broken operating system. And that tiny delay, that hesitation, it triggered a cascade failure. Enter Empress Dowager Cixi, 77. A brilliant politician, but a woman who feared change more than she feared the foreigners. She famously embezzled money meant for the Navy to build a marble boat in her garden. A stone boat. That sits in a lake. It cannot float. It cannot fight. It just sits there, looking expensive, while the Japanese were building a modern fleet next door. And that is where the final blow came from. In 1894, the ultimate humiliation happened. Japan, a tiny island nation that China used to view as a little brother, attacked. Japan had installed the update. Japan had modernized. They had revamped their entire society in just a few decades. The Qing fleet, on paper, was strong. They had big ships. But during the battle, Some ships ran out of shells. And worse, some of the shells did not explode. When they checked them later, they found out why. They were filled with sawdust. Sawdust instead of gunpowder. Because some official down the line had pocketed the difference. You cannot fight iron with corruption. After that defeat, the system crashed. Rebellions everywhere. The Boxer Rebellion tried to fight guns with kung fu and superstition, and it ended in a massacre. 8 foreign nations occupied Beijing. The empire was not running the world anymore. It was being carved up on a dinner table like a melon. So here we are. The promise I made you at the start. How did the most powerful empire on Earth lose to a software update? It was not just about the wooden ships. It was not just the opium. The Qing did not lose because they were small. They lost because they believed they did not need to change. They mistook their past success for future safety. They thought their bank account would protect them from innovation. They thought tradition could stop a steam engine. It is a lesson that terrifies CEOs and presidents to this day. When the notification pops up, when the world shifts, you have 2 choices. You can click install now. It is painful. It is expensive. It is scary. Or you can click remind me later. The Qing clicked remind me later. And the world just left them behind. Do not ignore the notification. I am James, and thanks for watching James Explains.